Most dangerous situations do not begin with anything that looks dangerous. They begin with a favor between friends, a routine work order, an old device that needs erasing, a care instruction, or one simple question at a doctor's appointment. Ordinary moments, ordinary choices. But sometimes all it takes is one person deciding that control matters more than someone else's safety, or that an uncomfortable truth can wait until tomorrow. And by the time everyone understands what is really happening, the damage has already been done. Tonight's stories are about trust being used as access, silence becoming its own decision, and familiar people revealing something you were never supposed to see. There are no distant monsters here. The threat is already inside the house, holding the key, following the routine, and acting like everything is normal. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin with a Saturday favor between two old friends. I'd known Nate since we were 14. We went to the same high school, worked a couple of summer jobs together, and somehow stayed friends, after most people from back then drifted off. His mom had my number because I'd helped around the house over the years whenever she needed another pair of hands. So when she asked me to come over on a Saturday and help clear out the garage before she put the place up for sale, I didn't think there was anything unusual about it. She called again while I was driving and asked if I could stop at the pharmacy for Lauren's rescue inhaler. Lauren is Nate's younger sister. Her old one wasn't empty yet, but it was getting close, and the refill was the same kind she already used. I picked it up, put the pharmacy bag on the passenger side floor with my jacket, and left it there when I pulled into the driveway. Nate's mom was waiting by the garage with gloves and a pile of flattened boxes. Before we started, she told me Nate was inside and hadn't really slept. The house sale had him worked up because nobody could give him a straight answer about where he was supposed to live afterward. She also said he'd become convinced the family was saving recordings of his outbursts for a social worker. Just don't argue with him about the diagnosis stuff, she said, or treatment, it won't help. I told her I wouldn't. I figured I was there to move boxes and stay out of the family part of it. Lauren was standing near the open garage door, checking labels and telling us what she wanted to keep. We'd only been working for maybe 20 minutes when Nate came out of the house and saw a couple of boxes with his name on them. He asked why we were moving his things. His mom said they were sorting, not throwing anything away, but he talked over her and got loud almost immediately. I tried to bring it back down. I said we could stack his stuff along one wall and leave it alone until he went through it himself. He said his mom was trying to erase him from the house. Then he kicked an empty box and said everyone had already decided what was going to happen to him. Lauren pulled out her phone and started recording. She didn't hide it. She held it up and said their mom had asked her to say video if Nate started threatening people or breaking things again. He crossed the garage so fast that I didn't catch what he was doing until the phone was already in his hand. The screen locked almost right away. He tapped at it, held it toward Lauren, and demanded her code. When she wouldn't give it to him, he told her to unlock it with her face and delete the video while he watched. There was a lot of dust in the garage from the old boxes, and Lauren had been coughing on and off already. Once Nate took the phone, it got worse. She tried to tell him to give it back, but she had to stop in the middle of the sentence to breathe. Her mom moved toward her. Nate just kept asking for the code. Lauren turned and went into the house. I'd seen her inhaler on the kitchen counter before, and I figured Nate knew where she was going because he followed her and reached the kitchen first. The inhaler was next to a bowl of keys and some unopened mail. Nate picked it up before Lauren got to the counter. For a second, I thought he was going to hand it to her. Instead, he backed away. "Delete the video," he said. "Then you get this." His mom told him to stop. I told him to give Lauren the inhaler. He barely seemed to hear either of us. He had the phone in one hand and the inhaler in the other, both held close to his chest. Lauren leaned on the table with both hands. Her breathing was short and fast by then, and she wasn't trying to argue anymore. A few seconds later, she sat down because her legs looked like they were starting to give out. "Nate, give it to her now," I said. He said the whole thing could be over in a few seconds if she stopped being stubborn and unlocked the phone. I'd seen Nate angry plenty of times. That wasn't what bothered me. He was looking right at Lauren. He could see she wasn't getting a full breath, and he knew what the inhaler was for. He was still keeping it from her because of that video. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. At the same time, I told his mom the new inhaler was still in my car. I couldn't tell if she understood me right away, but she glanced at the side door and then looked back at Nate. She stepped closer to him and pointed at Lauren's phone. "What are you even trying to delete?" she asked. "You can't get into it. Why are you holding both of those?" Nate turned toward her and started saying they were collecting things to use against him. He said the video would go to the social worker and nobody cared what happened to him once the house was sold. His mom kept him talking. She asked who had told him that and why Lauren would need to record anything if he hadn't done anything wrong. The 911 call connected while he was answering her. I gave the dispatcher the address and said Lauren was having a bad asthma attack. Then I got an arm under hers and helped her up. She could still walk, but she was weak and moving slowly. We went through the utility room between the kitchen and the side door, while I stayed on the phone. Nate didn't notice right away. By the time he looked over, we were outside. He didn't follow us. Through the open side door, I could still hear him arguing with his mom. My car was only a few steps away. I opened the passenger door, grabbed the pharmacy bag, and tore it open. Lauren took the inhaler out herself. It was the same kind she already knew, and even with her hands shaking, she got the packaging off, got it ready, and used it. It didn't help all at once. Her breathing stayed fast, and for a moment, I thought the medication had come too late. I sat her down against the side of the car and stayed on the phone. After a few minutes, her breaths started coming a little easier and not quite so close together. Her mom came outside and shut the side door behind her. Nate stayed in the house. The inhaler in his hand wasn't the only medication Lauren could get to anymore. The paramedics treated her next to my car and decided to take her to the emergency department because the attack had been bad and she'd gone too long without medication. When they asked what happened, I just told them what I had seen. Nate took her phone, then he held on to her inhaler and said he'd give it back if she deleted the video. The refill had been in my car. His mom confirmed it and said Nate couldn't be left alone with Lauren again. Later, she told me he'd been taken for an emergency psychiatric evaluation after the family gave their statements. I didn't ask what diagnosis they gave him or what happened after that. I didn't need the details. Lauren recovered. Her family changed where they kept her medication and made sure there was always another inhaler somewhere Nate couldn't control. Nate called me several times over the next few weeks. I never answered, and I never went back to that house as his friend. I still don't know if he fully understood how badly it could have ended, or if he'd convinced himself Lauren could wait a few more seconds. It doesn't matter to me. He watched his sister struggle to breathe and kept her medicine in his hand because he wanted a video deleted. That was the end of our friendship. Mental illness can explain somebody's behavior, but it does not make this acceptable. Nate knowingly used his sister's medication as leverage while she was struggling to breathe. At that point, this was no longer an argument about a phone or a video. He was gambling with Lauren's life because staying in control mattered more to him than her safety. The narrator was absolutely right to call emergency services, help her reach the second inhaler, and end that friendship afterward. You can feel sympathy for what Nate was going through without pretending the people around him were required to remain in danger. His family set the only reasonable boundary. He could not be alone with Lauren again. Now, on to the next story. I was 38 when this happened, working for a regional restoration company. Most of our jobs were water damage, mold, or opening walls, so a plumber could reach a leak. The call for apartment 2B sounded routine. The property manager had found dampness along the bottom of a bedroom wall in a vacant unit and wanted us to open it before it spread. It was an older 2-story rental complex that had been renovated in pieces over the years. New drywall over old plaster, dead pipes left in place, wiring run wherever somebody had room. Pretty normal for that kind of building. I brought 2 guys from my crew, and the manager let us into 2B with the office master. The former tenant was an older woman who had already moved out. While we carried in plastic and tools, the manager mentioned she used to complain about a stale smell in the bedroom, noises inside the wall, and a few small things going missing. He said it casually, like he was explaining why she had been a difficult tenant. I remembered, because I had checked the unit a few months earlier. I looked at the windows, door frame, lock, and the plumbing I could reach, without opening anything. Nothing looked forced or loose, and there was no obvious way into the apartment. I told the manager the sounds were probably old pipes moving or an animal in the framing. In a building like that, it was a reasonable answer. Around the same time, our company had replaced a worn cylinder on the common boiler room door and keyed it into the property's master system, so maintenance wouldn't need a separate key. The moisture meter showed elevated readings from the baseboard up about 18 inches. We pulled the trim, cut a test section, and started taking out drywall. I expected a pipe chase 6 or 8 inches deep. Instead, the first piece opened into a space almost deep enough for a person to stand in. I put my light through, and the beam kept going sideways, much farther than the apartment layout should have allowed. We widened the cut. Behind the newer wall was the building's original masonry, with a long service space left between the two. There were dead pipes, rusted brackets, and old wiring clips, which all made sense. The rest of it didn't. The dust had been disturbed in a path, and small debris had been pushed aside. On the floor was flattened cardboard, a few empty plastic bottles, and a cheap cell phone, plugged into an old extension cord running farther down the space. I wasn't trying to make every object mean something, but none of it looked like contractors had left it years ago. One of my guys leaned in with a work light while I checked where the wall ran. Farther down, a few openings around old vents and pipe penetrations had been widened. One lined up behind a high vent grill in the bedroom of 2B. Another pointed toward the unit next door. We tested the first one. My guy held the light near the opening while the manager stayed in the bedroom. He called back that he could see it behind the grill, beside where the former tenant's bed had been. So there wasn't much left to argue about. Someone had been inside that wall space, close enough to look into a bedroom. We still didn't know how they got in or for how long. I photographed the phone where it was, unplugged it, and kept it with me while the manager called the senior maintenance technician. He handled the boiler room and most of the old service areas. He showed up about 20 minutes later, looking like somebody pulled from another work order who expected a leaking pipe. He asked what we'd found, and I showed him the opening. He was still acting pretty unconcerned until he looked inside and saw the phone in my hand. "That's an old company phone," he said, and reached for it. Nobody had asked him about the phone. We hadn't turned it on or checked anything beyond the charger. I pulled it back and told him it was staying with us until everything in the wall had been documented. He argued for a minute. He said the passage had been sealed for years and maybe old contractors had used it during earlier repairs. That didn't explain the bottles, the disturbed dust, or how he knew what the phone was. But I wasn't going to accuse him of something we hadn't proved. I told him we should figure out the route first. Based on the dead pipes, room dimensions, and distance to the outside wall, the service space should have ended at the common boiler room. He opened the door with the key ring he carried for the property and showed us the exposed pipe runs. At first, there was nothing obvious, just a shallow metal rack with filters, fittings, and half-used containers. Then, one of my guys noticed a straight seam in the painted wall behind the rack, outlining a rectangular service panel. The rack wasn't bolted down, and one person could slide it aside. Under its feet were several pale scrape marks in the concrete, from it being moved back and forth. The panel was on old hinges, with a flat turn latch painted with the wall. The paint around it was worn smooth, and the bottom edge had left a dark mark, where it rubbed the concrete. One of my guys turned the latch and pulled the panel open. It led into the same service space we'd cut into from 2B. We checked what we could from both openings. Along the apartments, the space was boxed in behind drywall. We found no exterior door and no second service hatch. The boiler room was the only practical route we could identify. While we were standing there, I noticed the cylinder on the boiler room door. Our company stamps replacement cylinders, and the order number was still visible near the faceplate. I recognized it. I'd installed it after management complained that the old lock kept binding, then keyed it into the property's master system, because that was what the work order called for. I told the manager to check the key log in the office. He came back a few minutes later and said the backup master was still in the safe. The only master permanently assigned to an employee was the one on the senior technician's ring. I want to be careful here. That didn't prove the phone was his, and it didn't prove he'd used the passage. I said that then, but now we knew how someone with that key could do it. They could open the boiler room, move the rack, go through the panel, and put everything back without walking through the residential hallway. I kept the phone and photographed the panel, scrape marks, cylinder number, and open passage. The manager held out his hand for the technician's key ring and told him he was suspended from entering any of the buildings until management reviewed what we'd found. The technician argued, but only verbally. He denied the phone was his and kept saying a master key didn't prove he'd gone through the panel. The manager took the ring and told him to leave. A local officer came out later that afternoon. The manager handed over the phone, our pictures, and a copy of the master key log. I showed the officer the route from the boiler room to 2B, explained how the cylinder had been keyed, and confirmed which employee had the permanent master. After that, there wasn't much else for me to do. A few weeks later, our company got another work order there. We framed a solid barrier at the boiler room end, sealed the widened openings along the apartments, and changed the lock setup so the regular maintenance master no longer opened every technical room in the complex. I was told the senior technician was suspended first, and then fired. Nobody told me whether he was charged or what was on the phone. I wasn't involved after that. The service space explained how the former tenant could have heard movement in the wall and where the stale smell might have come from. It also explained how somebody could be close to her bed without opening her apartment door. The missing things are the part I still can't explain. I don't know whether anyone entered the units or whether the space was only used to watch from behind the walls. I never found out how many apartments had openings behind them or how long somebody had been using that passage. What I do know is that a few months earlier, I'd stood in 2B and told the manager there was no hidden access. And not long after that, I installed the replacement cylinder that kept the boiler room on the master system, so the senior technician's everyday key still opened it. The former tenant reported noises, missing belongings, and a stale smell, and everyone accepted the easiest explanation because taking her seriously would have required more work. That was the first failure here. Then you add a hidden passage, viewing holes beside beds, and one employee with everyday access through the only practical entrance, even without knowing what was on that phone. Suspending him and changing the locks was basic common sense. The narrator should not blame himself for installing a cylinder according to a work order. He had no reason to know what the space was being used for. The disturbing part is that somebody may have exploited routine maintenance access while the woman living there was treated like a difficult tenant. The next story involves another boundary crossed inside a guest room. Lauren brought the tablet over on a Saturday afternoon in a bag with 2 old phones and a little speaker they wanted to put on Marketplace. I'm not an IT person or anything. I'm just usually the friend who gets asked to move photos, clear out an old phone, or set up a new one. I'd done it for Lauren before, so when she said, "Can you just erase this thing for me?" I really didn't think much of it. The tablet belonged to Nate. It was an older Android one that had apparently been sitting in a drawer for a few years. Lauren said he knew she was giving it to me and was fine with it. There wasn't a password on it. I charged it and started doing what I normally do before I reset something. I always check the file manager first because people forget what they have saved. Usually, it's a picture of an ID or a screenshot with account information. The Google account had already been removed, and the main gallery looked empty. But there were still a few folders from an old gallery app. Most of it was junk, like cropped screenshots and a blurry dog. I wasn't recovering deleted files. I didn't plug it into anything or use some program. The folders were just there and open normally. In one of them, I tapped a dark picture showing the corner of a bed, someone under a blanket, and a lamp beside them. I recognized the lamp before I really looked at the person. Lauren had bought it when she and Nate redid their guest room, and I'd made fun of the huge cream-colored shade because it looked too big for the nightstand. The dark blue quilt with the white stitched lines was theirs too. I knew exactly which room I was looking at. I backed out and went through the folder more carefully. There were 4 images tied to that room. 2 opened as small grainy copies. The other 2 were only fuzzy thumbnails. I had no idea whether the originals had been deleted, moved somewhere else, or disappeared when the old account was taken off the tablet. The tablet didn't tell me. Every picture showed a woman asleep, alone in the bed. The angle was what got to me. These weren't taken from the doorway because somebody was checking whether the room was in use. Whoever took them had been standing inside, close to the side of the bed. I tried not to decide who the women were because the faces were turned away or too blurry. But in one picture that opened, the woman had on a dark green t-shirt with a white logo over the chest. It looked like the shirt from the veterinary clinic where our friend Hannah worked. She wore those shirts outside work all the time, so I knew. Then I remembered a party at Lauren and Nate's where Hannah had stayed over. She had planned to get a rideshare home, but she'd had too much to drink and felt sick, so Lauren told her to use the guest room. I remembered the green shirt because Hannah had come straight from a late shift. One file had a date in the details that was close to that weekend. I didn't treat it like proof because I had no idea whether it came from the original picture or from when the gallery app made the smaller copy. It lined up, but I wasn't going to pretend I knew more than I did. I took pictures of the tablet screen with my phone, enough to show the images, the folder, and the date information. Then I stopped. I didn't look for hidden folders or try to bring anything back. 4 images meant it clearly wasn't one accidental photo, but I still didn't know exactly what I was looking at. I wasn't going to keep digging just because I could. I only contacted Hannah. First, I asked if she remembered staying at Lauren and Nate's after that party, and whether she'd been wearing one of her green clinic shirts. She said yes to both, then asked why I wanted to know. I called her because explaining it over text felt wrong. I told her I had Lauren's old tablet, that it used to belong to Nate, and that I'd found a picture of a woman sleeping in their guest room who looked like her. She was quiet for a second, then asked me to describe what I could actually see. I described the green shirt and dark shorts, the room, and which side of the bed the woman was on. Hannah said it was probably her. She remembered sleeping on that side because clean laundry had been piled on the other half. Then she said the guest room door had been partly open when she woke up, even though she normally shuts doors before sleeping. She also said her shirt had been twisted around her waist, and her shorts felt different than they had the night before. At the time, she figured she had just moved around in her sleep. Neither of us said that proved somebody touched her. The picture didn't show that, and Hannah didn't remember waking up with anyone in the room. But she confirmed enough. The house, what she was wearing the night she stayed there, that it wasn't some random picture from the internet. I didn't contact the other women or try to guess who they were from the thumbnails. I messaged Lauren and asked her to meet me somewhere without Nate. I only told her I'd found something on the tablet that she needed to see before they sold it. She met me in the parking lot of a coffee shop. Maybe 20 minutes later, I had the tablet, my phone, and the charger in a tote bag. We sat in my car because I didn't want to have that conversation inside around other people. I showed her the folder, the pictures that opened, the blurry thumbnails, and my messages with Hannah. I tried to keep it simple. The room was definitely theirs, and the woman in one picture was almost certainly Hannah. The open door and the way her clothes felt the next morning did not prove anyone had touched her. I said that more than once because I didn't want Lauren hearing something I couldn't actually back up. She knew the lamp and quilt right away. Then she started naming parties where women had stayed over because they were too drunk to drive or it had gotten too late to wait for a ride. I stopped her before she tried matching every thumbnail to somebody. The pictures were too bad for that, and guessing wasn't going to help. Lauren said she wasn't going back to the house to confront Nate in person. Her sister lived about 15 minutes away, so Lauren followed me there in her car. We parked on the street, and she got into mine for the call. She texted her sister that she needed to stay the night, then called Nate and put him on speaker. We didn't tell him where we were. He answered like everything was normal. Lauren said we had found pictures on the old tablet of women sleeping in their guest room. There was a pause, and the first thing he asked was why I had been opening his old files. Then he asked whether I had copied anything. Lauren told him that wasn't the point. Nate said he didn't remember everything on the tablet, and that some pictures might have been downloads. When Lauren said there were several from their guest room, he changed it to saying he might have taken pictures of guests a few times, out of curiosity. But it wasn't what we were making it sound like. Lauren said Hannah's name and described the green clinic shirt, the quilt, and the side of the bed she had been on. Nate went quiet again. Then he admitted he had gone into the guest room and taken a picture of Hannah while she was asleep. Right after that, he said he had never touched her, sent the pictures to anyone, or posted them. He also said there had been fewer pictures than it looked like because the tablet had made extra copies. I had no way to know if that was true. Lauren didn't argue about the number. She asked, one thing, was he confirming that he had gone into the room and photographed Hannah without her knowing? He said yes. Lauren ended the call. She sat there with both hands on the steering wheel for a while, then called her sister and asked her to come outside. Once Lauren was inside with the tablet and her overnight bag, I left. That night, she texted Nate that she wasn't coming home and that the engagement was over. Over the next few days, she canceled the wedding stuff and arranged a time to get her clothes and the rest of her things. She didn't keep asking him why he did it. Nate sent messages calling it an invasion of privacy and a strange habit he had already stopped, like using smaller words for it was supposed to make it smaller. Lauren warned a few women she knew had slept in that guest room while Nate was still using the tablet. She kept the message short and only said what we could confirm. Nate had admitted secretly photographing at least one woman while she slept there. She didn't tell anyone they had been touched or claim she knew who was in the other images. Lauren kept the tablet. I never opened those folders again, and neither of us tried to recover whatever was missing. We never found out how many women he photographed, whether other copies existed, or whether he did anything besides take the pictures. Lauren had heard enough from Nate himself to end the relationship. Calling this curiosity does not make it harmless. Nate entered a room where a woman was asleep and photographed her without her knowledge. She was vulnerable. She trusted the home she was staying in, and he used that access to violate her privacy. Whether he posted the pictures or physically touched anyone does not erase what he admitted doing. I also think the narrator and Lauren handled this carefully. They preserved what they could, confirmed only what the evidence supported, warned the women who may have been affected, and refused to invent accusations they could not prove. Lauren did not owe Nate another chance or a long debate about his intentions. Once someone secretly photographs sleeping guests, ending the relationship is not an overreaction. Let's move into the fourth story. I was covering a one-day home care shift in Virginia because the regular nurse had called out. He couldn't be left without licensed staff, and I'd never worked with him. His aunt went through the meds, supplies, chart, and his basic care. Then she showed me the hood. It was thick, opaque, and covered his head to his neck. The main closure was behind his head, out of reach because of his shoulders. A separate strap ran under his jaw through a hard plastic guide and could be adjusted by staff. He could talk, use his phone, and feed himself. He needed help with hygiene, skin checks, and the hood. The RN care plan said that for pressure, burning, or numbness, I was to loosen the lower strap, one setting, check the skin, document it, and secure it again. His aunt had left a note on top of the gloves, gauze, and a folded towel. Do not unfasten anything without me. Call or text first. I asked if there was a medical reason. She only said he didn't handle anyone messing with the hood very well. She was going to the pharmacy, about 5 minutes away, and repeated the warning before she left. It annoyed me more than it scared me. The note contradicted the care plan, but it didn't cancel it. The shift was normal at first. I checked his medications and vitals, helped with lunch, and charted it. After his aunt left, he said the strap under his jaw was pinching him. I checked the part of his neck I could see and felt along the guide. Nothing looked twisted, but the material was too thick to see underneath. He said his aunt was embarrassed about how he looked after surgery. He wasn't asking me to remove the hood, only loosen the lower strap. His breathing was fine, but he kept saying the skin felt caught. I messaged his aunt and said I'd do the minimum skin check in the plan if she didn't answer. Then I called the on-call RN. It went to voicemail, so I left that. I waited and checked the chart again. There was no separate order against adjusting it, and policy didn't require delaying the skin check for a callback. Ignoring a possible pressure injury didn't seem safer. I told him I would loosen it. One position, look quickly, and fasten it again. I put on gloves and asked him to keep his head still. I held the lower edge of the hood against his neck with one hand and released the catch with the other. The strap didn't move. One notch, it slid through the guide and came out several inches before I could stop it. The bottom of the hood lifted away from his face. I saw part of his mouth, one cheek, and the edge of his jaw. I didn't have time to check the skin. My own face suddenly felt wrong. Not painful exactly, more like it was sitting on top of me and needed to come off. My fingers were already digging beside my mouth before I understood what I was doing. I grabbed that wrist with my other hand. Then, the hand holding it let go and reached for the other side of my face. He didn't call for help, turn away, or pull the hood down. He raised his chin and leaned closer, keeping the open part of his face where I could see it. He was washing my hands, not my eyes. I backed away and tried to hold both hands against my chest. I turned my head for maybe a second, but I could still see him at the edge of my vision, and my fingers went right back to my cheeks. He never touched me. Each time I nearly looked away, he changed the angle of his head just enough to stay in front of me. I could see him adjusting to my movement. I still couldn't stop my hands. It was less than a minute. That was enough for my nails to open several deep scratches beside my mouth and tear the same spots where my fingers kept catching. His aunt came back a few minutes after my message. She saw the bottom of the hood hanging open and didn't ask what happened. She grabbed the folded towel, covered his face, and pulled the hood back into place before she came near me. The urge didn't stop right away, but it weakened fast once I couldn't see him. She caught both my wrists and held them against my chest until I quit trying to reach the cuts. Then she called EMs and pressed gauze to my face. He stayed in the chair with the hood closed and didn't resist. I never saw his face again. The injuries were painful but not life-threatening. I had several deep scratches and a few small tears around my mouth. Treated. The agency suspended service that day while the care plan was reviewed. They found that the lower strap had already been worked partly out of its guide. The accessible end could have been moved bit by bit with his fingers, though he couldn't reach the rear closure or remove the hood. They couldn't prove he'd done it. His aunt said she had secured it correctly that morning, and nobody could establish when it shifted. They also found an old note from another temporary worker asking not to be sent back after a panic reaction while handling the hood. It didn't mention seeing his face or self-injury, so the agency had never treated it as a separate safety issue. The incident report listed the conflict between the care plan and the aunt's note, plus the strap being out of position. The insurance paperwork called my injuries self-inflicted during an acute stress reaction. Service stayed suspended, and his aunt went back to handling the hood, but nobody established what the effect was or how much he understood. Technically, my hands caused the injuries. That is what the paperwork says. It has no way to say that I wasn't controlling them. The clearest failure here is sending a temporary nurse into that home with contradictory instructions and incomplete safety information. The written care plan required one action, the aunt's note demanded another, and an earlier worker had already reported a serious reaction around the hood. Somebody needed to stop, investigate, and create an unambiguous procedure before another nurse was placed in that position. Instead, the warning remained buried until someone was injured. The narrator followed the clinical plan, contacted the aunt, called the on-call nurse, and used the least invasive option available. Whatever caused that reaction, and however much the patient understood, blaming it entirely on the nurse's self-inflicted injuries misses the obvious point. Staff cannot protect themselves from a danger the agency refuses to identify clearly. On to the final story. 2 weeks before my 5-year-old son went across the hall and told our neighbor his mom wouldn't wake up, I lied to my wife's obstetrician. Erin was 32, about 6 months pregnant, and had been sober for a little over 4 years. We had already been through one relapse. We lived apart for a while after that, and Noah stayed mostly with me. So when Erin got pregnant again, we told the high-risk clinic about her history. At one of the first appointments, we made a plan. If the cravings got worse, or if either of us saw something that looked like she might be using again, we would change the situation with Noah and call the addiction specialist. It wasn't an order from the clinic. It was our agreement. I work nights as a maintenance tech at a distribution warehouse, which meant Aaron was alone with Noah several nights a week. Denise lived across the hall. She took packages for us sometimes, and Noah knew her well enough that going to her door wasn't unusual. A few weeks before I lied, Aaron had a root canal that turned into a miserable ordeal. The dentist knew her history and didn't give her opioids, but the pain and all the discussion about pain medication brought the cravings back hard. Aaron told her obstetrician that herself. I took that as proof she still had control. I figured if she was willing to say it out loud, she was handling it. A few days later, I found a white pill on the bathroom floor beside the vanity. I had no idea what it was, and I didn't start searching the apartment. Aaron said it probably fell out of an old travel makeup bag where she used to keep nausea or allergy medicine, then picked it up and threw it away. That explanation was possible. The problem was, after the last relapse, we had agreed not to keep loose pills or anything we couldn't identify in the apartment. Not long after that, her phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I saw a missed call from Kayla, someone Aaron used to get high with years ago. Aaron said Kayla had reached out because a person they both knew had died, and she hadn't answered. I didn't ask to go through her phone. A missed call wasn't the same thing as contact, but between that and the pill, I knew we were supposed to tell the clinic instead of waiting for proof. At the next appointment, the obstetrician asked Aaron about the cravings. Aaron said they were still there, but she was managing them. Then the doctor asked me if I had noticed anything at home. People from Aaron's past getting in touch, medication we didn't recognize, anything different. I knew what she meant. Telling the truth would have meant using the plan we had made. Noah's routine would change. I would have to deal with work, and we might have to live apart again. Mostly, I did not want to admit that after 4 years and all the work it took to put our family back together, we could be in the same place again. So I said no. I told the doctor I hadn't seen anything that worried me. Aaron let out a breath and looked down at her hands. I noticed and kept my mouth shut. The clinic set up more frequent check-ins and an appointment with the addiction specialist. Anyway, my lie didn't stop her medical care. It just meant nothing changed at home. I kept going in for my night shifts, and Aaron stayed the only adult there with Noah. For the next 2 weeks, I thought about calling the clinic myself. Then we would have a normal evening. Noah would work through letters from kindergarten with Aaron, or we would talk about where the crib might go. I kept using those nights as a reason to wait. The night it happened, I ate dinner with them and left for the warehouse like usual. A few hours into my shift, Denise called me from Aaron's phone. She said Noah had found Aaron on the bathroom floor and couldn't wake her. He had gone into the hallway and knocked on Denise's door. She had already called an ambulance and taken him into her apartment. I left work and drove to the hospital. By the time I got there, Aaron had been taken upstairs and Noah was still with Denise. The staff would only tell me she was alive and being treated. Later, a doctor said the tests showed recent opioid use. They couldn't tell me when it started, how often it had happened, or whether saying something sooner would have prevented that night. When Aaron's obstetrician and the addiction specialist asked me about home, I told them I had lied at the last appointment. My mouth went dry before I said it. Once I started, I told them about the pill and the call from Kayla. I also told them I had understood the doctor's question and answered no on purpose. I couldn't keep saying this had come out of nowhere. My lie didn't make Aaron use, but it kept our schedule the same, and I kept leaving Noah there while his safety depended on how Aaron was doing. When Aaron was awake enough to talk, she said she never meant to put Noah in danger. She said she thought she could keep using separate from taking care of him. Then she asked me not to destroy our family over one slip. I told her I was giving the medical team everything I knew and Noah and I were not coming back to live with her for now. He would not be alone with her unless another adult we both agreed on was there. I didn't argue about whether it had happened once or more than once because I didn't know. I just knew I wasn't keeping the old arrangement anymore. After that, the clinic staff talked with us about treatment and temporary safety measures. They could recommend things and help arrange them, but I was the one who took Noah and moved out. Erin started a treatment program for pregnant women. When she saw Noah, another adult we had agreed on was there. I used leave from work, changed shifts where I could, and asked for help on nights I still had to go in. None of it was neat, but I wasn't sending him back because the old routine was easier. I still don't know what will happen with the pregnancy, whether Erin will stay in treatment or whether we will live together again. I haven't promised a divorce, and I haven't promised I'm coming home. Right now, the decisions I'm making are about Noah. I can't say that telling the truth at that appointment would have stopped Erin's relapse or prevented that overdose. I can say that, after I lied, the same arrangement stayed in place for 2 more weeks, even though I already had reason to change it. Erin is in treatment, Noah is not alone with her, and the family we had before has not been put back together. The narrator is right about one thing. His lie did not cause Erin to relapse, but he also understands the part that was his responsibility. A doctor asked him directly about warning signs. He recognized the signs, and he deliberately said no because telling the truth would have disrupted their lives. That decision left Noah in an arrangement the family had already agreed should change if concerns appeared. I have sympathy for him because fear and denial can make people cling to normality, especially after years of rebuilding. But protecting the appearance of a stable family cannot come before a child's actual safety. What matters is that he finally stopped minimizing it, told the medical team everything, moved Noah, and set firm supervision rules. He cannot undo the lie, but he can refuse to repeat it. And that wraps up today's stories. This was a heavy batch because so much of the damage came from people ignoring boundaries, choosing control over safety, or convincing themselves that a warning could wait a little longer. The threats were different, but each story had that same uncomfortable feeling. Someone knew something was wrong, and the situation became worse because another person refused to act responsibly. Which story stayed with you the most? And do you think any of these situations could have been stopped earlier? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I genuinely appreciate you spending this time with me. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.